I guess I was on mute. Anyway, let's start another Ask Mintos Anything session. And as usual, so we're going to start with those questions which have been upvoted the most, and go one by one. And I will try my best to cover as many questions as possible. Obviously, there were quite a lot of questions, so unfortunately, we're not going to be able to cover all of them. But we'll do my best to cover as many as possible. So we have it around 1 hour, so I'll start right away, and let's go to the first question. So the first question is really about why do we show loans who are pending in recovery as finished loans? And from an investor's perspective, these loans are current, not finished. Please change. So the main idea is actually that we have to show two statuses. So one status is status which is with the borrower. So from investor's perspective, they are buying the claim rights in direct structure against the final borrower. In indirect structure, the claim rights against the loan originator, which are then backed by the pledge of loans. So we have to show the status of the underlying loan because that then dictates if the borrower is still paying the interest, is it late or not. So that goes into this finished or current loan status for the borrower. And then the other status is when the loan, for instance, has been finished, we receive the information through API that the loan has finished, and then that money is collected by the loan originator, and we are basically collecting it from the loan originator. And in those issue cases or problem cases, it might go in recovery, and then that sits there. So it's basically two different statuses which you have to look at. One is with respect to the borrower, and then there's with respect to the loan originator. Okay, so the next question is, all the changes since a year ago are to the detriment of investors. What do we want to do about it? And will there be another step in the direction of investors soon? What we are working on, and I think what we realize very well, is working very hard on recovery. So that's definitely what we're gonna continue doing. So with those issue cases, recoveries is by far the most important topic these days. On recoveries, actually, well, I would describe it as a job good done when everything is recovered. Obviously, it's not, and it's going to take time. But there has been a decent progress with recovery. So overall, we see that for suspended loan originators, we have and also defaulted, we have recovered approximately 35-40% of the exposure already, which is decent. And in absolute numbers, that's about like 33 million euros, which have been already recovered. And the recoveries continue. Obviously, with some kind of cases, the recoveries are doing better. With other cases, it's less good and less kind of, we can recover less, at least to date. So, for instance, with some lending companies, everything already has been recovered. So the same Lendo, which went into the wind down, then Peachy is going to be soon recovered everything. Then the same Utah covered for the Kosovo. Then it was about Metro Credit in Russia. So there's quite a few examples when we have recovered everything. Then there are examples which are in between. It's basically, for instance, the same Varks or Akulaku or Varks, we have recovered already 8 million, which is around like close to 30% of the exposure. Akulaku as well. So it depends on the case by case. And then there are cases which doesn't go as well. So the same Capital Service, which is still in progress, and the same Alex Credit or other cases. So it depends. So we're gonna work on recoveries. That's for sure. That's on kind of top of our agenda. Then it's continue working on product. So on product, we continue working. We implemented based on the feedback. We implemented new strategies. We are working on updating how the ratings are basically depicted, and the whole kind of rating methodology are gonna change. Continue improving the mobile app. So a lot of things which go into the product. So we're gonna continue building the product, and that's what we do. And then the third, what we are working on is regulation. So we're gonna become regulated marketplace for investing in loans. So we are working on getting necessary permissions. So for the marketplace, it's gonna be investment firm license, which then gonna mean that we are instead of investors buying the claim rights against investors, they will buy the financial instruments which are linked to the loans, which is actually similar setup as you might see in, say, in the US, if you look at the same lending club, so they have a similar setup. And then it's also electronic money institution license, which is going to allow us to provide additional services such as IBAN account, then Mintos debit card on top of that, which would allow investors to access money which is not invested much easier, and also allowed to provide additional services to the same loan originators and so forth. So the regulation is definitely the third thing which we are working on in the future. So then what is the status, and can we give an update on Aku Laku? It is suspended from the market but still has a B+ rating. This means it will come back to normal. So update on Aku Laku is that they are paying as agreed in our kind of restructuring plan. They are looking for the additional equity injection. They are basically continue working on that and issuing loans in smaller amounts, but still issuing. So about the ratings, it's actually the ratings we are not changing because at the end of the day, they are not really actionable. So if the loan originator is suspended from both secondary market and primary market, it actually doesn't matter what kind of rating they have. So we are not necessarily changing the rating there. But having said that, all the suspended loan originators which are suspended, if they cover all the pending payments, we would be glad to see them back on the market. So, and with the same Aku Laku, and it is actually a pretty decent chance that they're going to cover in a shorter period than we thought, and then they would go back to normal and go back to the market. And then we might review the rating. Most likely then, though, we would already have the new rating system or more kind of gradual rating system, but it would go back to the market. Okay, so let's move on. The next question is, why can't investors who have not agreed to the terms and conditions withdraw their monies themselves? Why does this have to happen from you? It's actually pretty simple from the legal perspective, because if investors disagree to the terms and conditions and they want to basically kind of not continue using Mintos and then disagree to these terms and conditions, then we actually don't have any legal terms to service them. So we don't have a kind of legal grounds to service them. So we cannot really then provide any service to them. So basically, then that means that we are entering into the kind of winding down of their account, which then would mean that we have to implement it the way it is. That the investors cannot really go on the account only in the view kind of mode. They can look at, and they cannot sell on the secondary market. They cannot invest or any other things to do, because we don't have any regulated kind of relationship anymore with the investors. So that's the reason why it is that we are basically the way to withdraw the money, or we are paying back the money which is collected ourselves. So the next question is, I'm planning a new blog. Which name do you like best? I think it's a creative question, but it's not a very constructive question, so I'm gonna move to the next question. I have not agreed to the terms and conditions. However, this week only part of my non-investing money was transferred to me. Why isn't the entire part paid out? It's hard. It should not be the case. It's hard to comment on the specific case. I would suggest to reach out to the support team. In general, everything what is kind of not invested is transferred to investors once a week, so this should not be the case. But it's hard to comment without knowing specific ID what might have been an issue there. But in general, we haven't seen those things happening with, in the past. So the next is, what is the situation with capital service? Did you reject the proposal? What's next? And when and how much will be recovered according to our opinion? Capital service. So we obviously rejected the proposal. We already rejected before we shared with investors. So we said to capital service, well, guys, this is basically kind of a ridiculous offer. So we cannot agree. As basically agents of investors or representatives of investors, we cannot agree. Capital Service insisted that, well, you should ask investors. So we did ask investors, and investors said, well, 97% obviously said that it is not acceptable offer. So that's what we conveyed to the Capital Service as well. We met Capital Service here in Riga actually last Friday, and basically what we are working on is on a restructuring plan, which would give us a viable pass out of the situation and basically protect investor interest the best, and also kind of yield to the most recoveries possible, and hopefully yield to full recoveries, which is definitely possible, but there are a few, of course, things which have to materialize. It's the capital service has to get back to much better kind of collections, which obviously are not easy in the pandemic situation, and also restructure the cost base and so forth. So it goes a lot of kind of work into this restructuring plan, which makes sense to them, but then meanwhile protects investor interest. So there, it's we sent our term sheet to them, and now basically just negotiating what would be, in our opinion, better proposal, which would kind of keep capital service operational, but then also would protect the interest of investors. So that's the situation of capital service. All right, so the next question is, who gives us the right to request bank statements? Why are we dragging the know your client unnecessarily? It's actually not that we have the right to request bank statements or any information. It's actually a requirement. So we are required by the law to request and to know our client. So at times, if it is necessary, then we have to ask also for the bank statement. So it's not really right, and well, it's also not in our best interest to drag the process, because if we drag the process, then obviously investors, well, they cannot withdraw the money, so they are happy, or if they want to invest, they cannot invest. So there's no really any interest whatsoever for us to drag the process. So we do our best, but well, we have to follow the law, especially now when we are on the path to receiving the respective licenses and permissions from the regulators. So we really have to follow what is out there. And when it comes to the information which we request, it is basically, again, following the law, which we have to admit in the Baltics or in Latvia specifically, we have a rather stringent AML law, given the kind of past experience which we have had with the banks here and other institutions. So it's rather stringent, and it might be more stringent than investors have seen in other countries. But it is what it is. So we run compliant operations, and we have to follow what is requested from us. So that is why we request this information. It's definitely not in our best interest to, or not in our interest at all, to drag it or make it complicated. So we try to do it as user-friendly as possible, but well, given the limitations what the law is imposing. So when is the next payment from Monego? Monego, it's the same situation, and that's why there hasn't been any news, so nothing new to share there. Liquidator is basically collecting the payments from the borrowers, and we are waiting for them to transfer the money to us. There was a tax audit for the case, so that's also put some additional kind of limitations what the liquidator can do. And then that, I guess, finished something like end of August, 20-something of August. But we also changed the law firm because we believe that liquidator is not basically doing their best job. So we changed the law firm, and we are basically working on getting that money from the liquidator to us. Not all of money has been collected from the borrowers. It's actually the situation in Balkans as such is not very great when it comes to pandemics. So obviously the collection is not easy there as well, but there is a significant part already collected, and we are working to get that payment to investors. So that's update on, well, Monego, where not much has actually changed there. So the next is, will the funds in the recovery page get a similar breakdown as pending payments? It will. It's what we put out, our product engineering team put out was a kind of the first MVP, breaking down pending payments and really showing what is in recovery and what is kind of business as usual for pending payments. And the next iteration, we will see the breakdown similar to the pending payments. So that's coming in the next few weeks. All right, so the next question is about Finco. With SEBO, the most profitable part of Finco, being sold to Monego, how likely is it that Finco will be able to cover all outstanding WARC's obligations? Obviously, any proceeds which Finco got from a sale, well, that helped to cover part of the buybacks, but SEBO itself, while it was profitable in 2019, in 2020 now, the outlook was not actually spectacular. It was rather bleak. Moldova is very hardly hit by the pandemic. I think they again extended the emergency situation by mid of September. The cases are surging, and it's of course not helping the kind of the lending business. So we were actually, from the recovery perspective, we were glad to see that there's any taker of the operations in Moldova, because if not, then most likely the SEBO would not be able to actually operate any further, and they would see basically winding down of operations, and then we are relying on how much they can recover or not. So I think for those investors of SEBO and on Finco Group as such, this was the best outcome, and that there were not many, if any. I don't think that in these circumstances any other would have acquired, except for Monego, which have operations in the region, and they know the region, and they actually can see it kind of working in the long term. And then, of course, for SEBO comes also the Monego buyback guarantee on top of that, and group guarantee. So that helped, but that helped only a little bit. So the amount which basically they could sell it for was negligible, but at least it was more than zero, so which is good. But the most about the WARCs is going to come from and it is coming from the collections. So WARCs basically in Armenia continues collecting the payments, and now it's actually getting better and better. So they are transferring money every week or every second week, and we have seen already 8 million euros recovered, which represents about like 30% of the exposure, initial exposures, and we see it's there is good progress, and hopefully, of course, as with any of those recoveries, I think what is important to emphasize it, the amounts are not insignificant. Those are like big amounts, and it takes time to collect and so forth. So it's not going to be that the recovery will be like immediate, and everybody, including us, we would want to see everything recovered like next day or next month. But well, the reality is that it takes time to collect. Then also for the buyback, well, the lending companies which are not operational, they are basically relying on the fees which they can collect and so forth to actually cover for those buybacks. Well, obviously they don't have like cash sitting on the balance sheet just waiting for covering the buybacks. So it takes time, and that's also with Finco is the same in Armenia. And for them, it will be most likely, as shared, it will be 2021, but 2020 should see that the most like bigger part of the exposure already covered. All right, so the next question is how will legal expenses be distributed across investors? And I'm glad that this question is brought up because I think there was quite a lot of misinterpretation on what we put out in terms and conditions. So, and that was, to be honest, fuck up on our side. So it's basically legal team believed that it's just updating the agreement, and that was the case. So we had all those clauses already before. We just put them in more kind of explicit language. And when it comes to legal expenses, so we have never charged investors to date or recharged, and we also don't see it happening in the future, like on a regular basis. So this clause about the legal expenses is basically for the situations when we see that there is a significant cost to take, which would help in recovery. So, for instance, the same take, not that it is a case, but for instance, that there would be, say, capital service case. They have like 20 million euros exposure, and we believe that it would make sense to take up the legal actions, and that would yield the most of the best recoveries. But if it's expensive, then actually we can be at a situation when we actually cannot take it because we don't have cash available or capital available for such big expenses, which can easily go in hundreds of thousands of euros for large exposures. And so we need a mechanism how we can actually take this action and then recharge investors. So that would be very much like one-off or very ad hoc situations when we do that. And then we would clearly communicate to investors, and we would not take those decisions lightly. Also, which perhaps we should reiterate, the legal cost would never be more than the recoveries, the recovered amount, so that would be taken only out of the recoveries. Also, the legal costs, so first of all, we would have to put most likely them ourselves down, so that's again kind of in the best interest, aligning interests with investors, and there's no really upside for us to go out and just spend on legal. So we are not in the business of supporting law firms for no reason. So that would be kind of careful decisions around that. If we do that, then the legal expenses would be distributed on per invested basis, so proportionally to investors. And again, just based out of successful recoveries. So I think that we put out the FAQs on that. We will further fine-tune the terms and conditions, but this basically was not a very good communication from our side when it comes to these legal expenses. We don't envisage and we don't plan to charge for our in-house legal expenses where we have a separate team working on legal. We don't see recharging like smaller legal expenses. This is for only for those situations when it's really like bigger legal expense, which would yield, in our opinion, for the best recoveries, and we are basically put in a situation when we cannot take it because we don't have the cash. But that would be in the best interest of investors. Okay, so. The next question is about capital service, how we want to fight with capital service. Well, first of all, I would not necessarily call it fight, so we want to cooperate with the capital service. So investors want to kind of see blood and they get emotional, but we have to kind of be rational and work out the case which basically yields to the best possible recoveries. So with capital services, as I said, so we're basically negotiating the restructuring case. We put forward kind of our proposal, which we believe is doable from that kind of cash flow forecast, and then would allow them to continue operating. So that's what we are in the process. And the next is how do we plan to regain confidence, and what are our current user retention numbers? I think first and foremost is really working on the recovery. So I think that's if we would not have those issue cases, and there would not be funds in recovery, then of course the sentiment would have been different. Understandably, that some investors have realized that actually, hey, 10+% return doesn't come without the risks. So there are risks, and unfortunately, in pandemic, many of those risks materialized in short period of time. But then again, if you look at the kind of risk-return ratio, so I think it would be unimaginable to get like 10-12%, and especially kind of in lending. When the pandemic hits, it's actually rather kind of quite a big effect on lending. And if you would not see any problems, that would be kind of unimaginable. So, and it's also kind of a law of big numbers. So we have a lot of loan originators in total. Before pandemic, we saw 600 million outstanding portfolio from about 70 different lending companies and 30 plus different countries. And it's just bound to happen. There are going to be some problem or the other problem. Be pandemic or not pandemic, there will be some problems here and there, but that's why investors are receiving the return of 10+%, if not more, right? If it were the case that investors are receiving, say, 3% return, and we would have seen the same amount of kind of issue cases, then I would say, yeah, that is a problem. But for the risk or for the return which investors are getting, so the risks are, obviously they materialize in short period of time, but there are risks, and they gonna materialize. And especially when you have a lot of kind of companies and a lot of outstanding portfolio, and you want to provide a diversified offering, then it's just bound to happen that there are going to be problems here and there. And then once they appear, it's not a matter of like if they're going to appear, but it's when they appear. It's our job is to do the best possible to kind of mitigate any downside for investors. So I think this is obvious that for us is to work on recovering as much as possible, continue working on the product, basically the things I shared already before. So the next is investors are now responsible for legal fees. What penalty is there now for Mintos for taking on weak lending companies or poor due diligence? Well, we are not, obviously we are not earning anything but the legal fees, and I already explained, so that would be very rare cases when we recharge, so that would be more kind of go to the law firms. Penalty for weak lending company, I mean, it all comes down to, it's not about necessarily kind of weak or strong or any other kind of characteristic of the lending company. Is more about how we look at it as to provide the loans which are priced accordingly. It can be very risky loan, but if it's priced at like 30+% or 40+%, then it would be fine that some of them kind of are defaulting, right? And likewise, if we bring on loan supply, which is at like 2-3% or 4 or 5%, which would be considered perhaps rather low risk, then we would expect not to have any defaults in those loans. So think of very prime segment loans. And we have had those cases. For instance, we had a discussion already some time ago with one of the banks in Germany, which was saying, hey, we would want to sell or basically take off the balance sheet loans which are originated to the borrowers in Germany. It's secured by the basically those are car loans, and well, we are able to sell them at like 3 or 3-point-something% to investors. Well, at that time, we didn't see that investors would be interested in that offering. So, on our due diligence, we are more focusing on making sure that the risk return is actually reasonable, and due diligence involves a lot of things from our side, looking at the management, loan performance, and so forth, financials, obviously, the kind of market situation, and many other aspects which you can read on our website. During due diligence, we are making assessment of the current situation and with the best information which we have at that moment, and well, we can make some predictions in the future, but obviously we cannot predict what's going to happen for the long term. So the same if you take the same capital service, well, that was a company which was operating for 20 plus years in Poland, and a very strong kind of lending company. Was it possible to predict how it's gonna? Well, first of all, nobody predicted pandemic, and in general, it's hard to predict the future. Was it possible? Well, at that moment, I believe we did a good job on due diligence, and I wouldn't necessarily call it a poor due diligence. Having said that, of course, we are improving the processes as we grow, as we kind of learn. Also, we are strengthening the team. Just recently, our leadership team was strengthened by a chief risk officer, which joined from one of the leading banks here in Latvia, with 15 plus experience in credit. So it's as well those things which we are working on to improve our due diligence. Okay. If Alex Credit is really in default, why do they still offer loans on their website? What's the agreement between us and Alex Credit? While they might offer loans on the website, they actually are originating very, very small amounts, if at all. When it comes to Alex Credit, then, well, Ukraine is actually not in a very good situation, and the pandemic is there as well, very kind of hard, well, very widespread. I think they again, well, yesterday announced they're going to close the borders. There's going to be emergency state and so forth. But nevertheless, so when we work with Alex Credit, so our approach in this particular case is to work on taking over the servicing of loans. So we are actually already have identified the partner and are in the very last kind of stage of taking over the servicing of the loans. We believe that will yield the most of recoveries. It still will be very challenging, especially in this current environment. So, but we will do our best to recover as much as possible from this loan portfolio, which we are, or basically the third party which we are engaging, which will help with collections and servicing. So that's the situation with Alex Credit. Okay, so the next is that you announced that we will launch Mintos loan notes. Please elaborate on these products. So Mintos loan notes, basically changing the from user experience. Well, not much going to change. The product perspective going to change quite a bit. So while the details are still in progress and it's rather kind of complex, kind of the whole whatever the whole setup is rather complex. So in a very high level, that would be that investors are buying the financial instrument. So they're going to buy what we most likely going to call Mintos loan notes. So they're going to buy the financial instrument from basically the loan originator. And this financial instrument is how it's going to come into the existence is that basically SPV are going to buy the loan portfolio or respective loans from the loan originator. So those loans going to sit on the SPV, and then SPV going to issue the financial instruments. So basically, it's the whole idea will remain the same. So investors going to take on the credit risk of the final borrower, but those loans also going to be bought with or sold with what you would call in finance recourse, or what we call the buyback guarantee. So that basically if the borrower is not paying it, then the loan originator has to buy them back. and investors will receive basically a return from their financial instrument whenever the borrower makes a repayment and so forth. So the concept going to remain the same, but the underlying structure going to change. So that's in a very kind of high level, but we will share more. So I think yesterday or the day before we already announced or published in the blog post one article about this, but we have a whole kind of whole article kind of list of articles which are coming to the blog post about this, and we will explain more about this. Okay, so the next is about Finco. How did Mintos not know about the early warnings Works received from the Armenian Central Bank, and what does it say about the DD team of Mintos? Well, we didn't know, and Works also didn't know that it will go where it went. So obviously, Works, it was a huge blow for Works, and as we see, it was also a huge blow for the Finco. And well, at the end of the day, it was a cash cow for the Finco, and then that has affected the whole Finco operations. Not saying that other countries have been kind of smooth sailing, but obviously that was a huge blow. These cases, it's when it comes to the specific case, it's they had a kind of ongoing discussion with regulator, and that's nothing new. So all the lending companies are having a constant dialogue with regulators. So regulators coming and asking questions about this or that. They can ask about I don't know, the agreements. They can ask about the underwriting, how they actually are doing some promotions, asking about financials. So it's ongoing. So all of the loan originators which you have and which are regulated are going to have the communication, and that was I believe the Works had this already. The loan which was considered not kind of repayable, they had it already communicated to Armenian bank already like 2 years or so. So it wasn't definitely considered that that's something kind of material change in their balance sheet, and that came as a surprise to the Works. And well, of course, if they didn't know, then also we didn't know. And also a good question, of course, is if we had known, so what can we do in that situation? So we could suspend them a few weeks earlier or a week earlier, and well, that's about it. We are obviously not a regulator, so we are not regulating or the lending companies, and we, well, technically, of course, we could not do it in all the 30 countries. So the regulators are doing their job, and if they see that there are some inconsistencies, well, unfortunately, that can lead to these situations. So there was no really way for us to know it, because it's kind of ongoing discussions, and we obviously cannot follow each and every discussion which loan originators have with the regulators. If it were kind of material, or if it were brought up by Works, then obviously we would have known and could have acted a bit earlier. But well, at that stage, well, there's only that much we can do. We can only limit how much investors, limit new investors investing in the loans. So the next is, what are the links between the shareholders of Mintos, Monego, and Finco? This is very clearly when it comes to Mintos and Monego. So there's equity, there's overlap of equity investors, and the same is Mintos and Finco. So that is clearly showed on the website. So we have overlap with Monego shareholders and with Finco shareholders. So the next is, I didn't agree to wait 2 years to get my money back from Works. I say you start to adhere to the agreements you have with investors, and for once be on their side. I think well, there's not really kind of question, more the comment, but still to comment on that. Well, we are at all times on the side of investors, and obviously we have to run the balance. We have to run in balance the marketplace, so we cannot just take one side or the other side. I think what we see is that investors kind of want to see blood, so they get emotional. They want to see kind of insolvencies, like people being sued and so forth. But we have to remain rational. So if you look at the recovery, so we have a whole recovery team. So actually, the guy who joined, who's leading the recoveries, he has done a good deal of recoveries for the big banks like HSBC and so forth. So and well, with all the experience you have, it's never a good. Well, it's very rarely would yield to better recoveries by making the company insolvent or basically declaring the bankruptcy. So it's much better to cooperate with it, work on the restructuring plan, and keep it as a going concern, right? Or as a going entity. If we would sue them, go into the court, that would be drag on and on, like for long periods of time. And then at the end of the day, most likely there would not be much assets anymore there. Also, just losing the loan originator, which is not anymore cooperating, they don't want to service the loans, and then there's nobody to do that, then well, it's also very difficult to make the collections. And also, when we look at those, the same like buyback guarantees or the group guarantees, of course, they are only as good as the companies which provide them. And in the group, like in the Finco group, well, it's not that in other entities there's like cash sitting in the accounts just waiting for us to claim to actually enforce the group guarantee. So all the other companies in the group also have had their fair share of problems, and if we basically take down the whole group, the recoveries would be much worse than we see now, and I don't think that would be in the best interest of investors. So we definitely see that investors want to see blood, they get emotional, but we have to remain rational and just work out those rather complex restructuring case. If it were that simple, that there is just we ask for the group guarantee, there's cash sitting in the accounts, and we get access to that cash, well, sure, we would have done it in the first place in the first day, but it's not that easy. So for most of the loan originators, the only asset which they have is outstanding portfolio with borrowers. So we have to basically service that portfolio, try to collect as much possible, and then from the fees which they charge, they can pay for the buybacks and so forth. So it's not that simple that there's just go in, enforce, and you're going to get the money. It's not going to happen like that. So it's most likely will lead to much worse recoveries for investors. So the next is that the secondary market fee is too high. Are we planning to reduce or remove it? We don't have any plans to reduce or remove it. We believe it is a fair, small fee for using additional service. So it is very liquid market which we can provide, and we obviously have to cover our costs as well in one way or the other. So secondary market fee is one of the fees. I think it's apart from FX fee, that's the only fee which we charge, and only for those who actually want additional service, which is basically selling before the loan term. Okay, so the next is, why do we advertise the money back guarantee? Is it legal to display false claims? Well, it's not that we can widely advertise, so we put it what it is. So the loans do come with a buyback guarantee. Guarantee is a very widely used legal term. Obviously, we could use also other terms. We could say that the loans are sold with a recourse, so basically that they could the lending companies would buy back the non-performing loans. We could call it that the loans are sold with even more fancy names would be credit default swap. So basically, additional agreement where the investors are buying the CDS from the lender. So many other ways. So we chose to go for the guarantee. That's a legal term, and well, as in any legal agreement, well, concluding agreement doesn't mean that it's kind of set in stone, 100%. Always gonna work out. So guarantee is as good as the company which provides the guarantee. So the next is about please comment on the accusations that Finco and Monego owners sold Sebo to themselves at a cut price to strip out all valuable assets before final Finco bankruptcy. So we covered already that in one of the previous questions about the Finco. On secondary market, would you consider allowing the trade of loans by suspended defaulted loan originators, provided that there is a clear warning for potential buyers? We have had multiple discussions about this, and while we see a lot of investors who want to sell approaching us and saying, hey, we kind of would want to see market for those suspended and defaulted loan originators, we rarely, if at all, have seen any buyer approaching us and saying, well, we're going to buy. So basically, there's no really what we don't see that there would be a functioning market, while there would be a lot of sellers who want to sell. We haven't seen like any, if at all, like buyer interest who would say, hey, I want to buy those assets. And even if there were, we think that the price difference would be like dramatic. So some of the buyers would be willing to buy those assets, I don't know, at like 5, 10, 20 cents to the dollar, while those who are holding them perhaps would not be willing to sell that low. So we don't see a functioning market there, and we see that would be very, very small market and for very, very small investors, and just doesn't at this moment, when we don't see clearly interest from the borrowers, is not on our roadmap. If we see that there's a lot of buyers coming in and saying that, hey, we want to buy them, and we definitely want to go and kind of gamble or take additional risk on some of the kind of problem cases, then we would reconsider this. For now, we don't have plans on this. Forte is celebrating their best year ever, and we haven't done anything to recover our money for more than 1 year. Isn't it crazy? We shared already. I think yesterday we had another call with some of our investors, and we shared already yesterday, and it was shared on some of the forums. We have seen, basically for the past year, Forte has been paying, but they have been covering the money which we put. So we had put out from our pocket before we introduced the pending payments. So we had put from our pocket about €1 million, which were outstanding from the Forte. So on the behalf of Forte, we hadn't received the money from them, and we put it on the Mintos investor accounts. So they have covered that one, and I think already today already the next payment came in, and that has been covered. The whole outstanding part due to us and subsequently investors, and now the next payments are going to investors. I think already some investors received payments from Forte, so it is a slow process, but we have been recovering, and we will continue to recover. So it's investors should see recoveries in the coming weeks and months from Forte as well. Good. So the next is how do we see Mintos evolving over the next 3 years? How important our funding source? How important as a funding source will be retail in 3 years? Over the next 3 years, so we're gonna continue working towards our vision of basically making loans as kind of accessible and traditional asset class for retail investors as possible, and basically so that every investor can, who are investing, they can look at the loans and put them next to whatever stocks, bonds, ETFs in their portfolio, and have good access to loans as an asset class. I see us focusing on retail for sure, so we don't see us changing that. So also, after 3 years, the retail going to be basically almost 100% of the funding source. So we believe that for institutional investors, there are access to this asset class. For retail, not that much. On top of that, we will also expand our offering. So we're gonna provide additional services and additional value to investors who want to get additional services. So the same IBAN account or Mintos debit card, or with investment firm, we will be able to provide other investment opportunities, not only loans. So we can provide the same ETFs or kind of more traditional investments. Likewise, with investment firm license, we can provide more active portfolio management. So that's also something which we would work on. So there's a lot of kind of branching out from the current offering and basically adding additional product lines and providing additional value to our investors. And also we can provide additional value to the lending companies. So the next question is about Mintos' future, as quite some lending companies have been suspended, but are there any new companies that consider joining Mintos? So we didn't look at any new lending companies since the start of pandemic, but actually since a few weeks ago, we actually restarted working with new companies. So we're definitely going to see new companies joining, and I think already first going to join not that far in the future, but we will take it kind of step by step. So and with each of the lending companies who are joining, we have to understand how they have dealt with the pandemic, and also we have to balance the kind of investor demand and loan supply. So there's not really much point in putting a lot of loan supply if there's not enough investor demand. We see investor demand returning, and it's slowly kind of increasing, but we have to match it with the loan supply. So we'll see new loan originators joining, and we also see the current loan originators introducing new products or putting new products on the marketplace, and that's also going to widen the diversification for investors. So the next is about the Alex credit. We covered that one already before. Then the next is how many lawsuits have you filed against our partners who cheated investors and do not return the money? We have filed a lawsuit against Eurocent, which was way back in a day. So, and that's actually a very representative case of going through the court and going this kind of bloody kind of way of going about the recoveries. So the law, the court is still to be held, and it's already like 2 or more years, and just dragging on the process. So the court going through lawsuits is never a fast process, and doesn't work very well. And then we also filed with or were about filing with I think other 2 loan originators, but in general, as I shared before, the law kind of going through the court is usually the last resort, because it usually leads to the very weak recoveries. So. But well, that doesn't mean that we would shy away from going to the court. So if we see that it is possible or to recover more through the court, and there's kind of clear case, and definitely we would not shy from doing that. So, okay, so how is it possible that Alex Credit received a payment from the borrower and did not transfer it to Mintos? Shouldn't they punish for misusing the money? I'm not sure if it's like I don't know a specific kind of split between in the recovery amounts, how much is borrower repayment buyback, but majority is definitely buyback. And well, when it comes to the borrower repayments, for sure they should transfer to us. But well, if they don't do that, then of course we have to work on the case, and that's what we're doing. So there's not much add to this here. So the next is, I heard that Oleg Boyko owns Mintos Via Constantino. Is that really true? Well, while I don't know about the others, but well, as far as I know, also not related. But with Mintos, there's no relationship whatsoever with Mr. Boyko. Obviously, the market is small, so we know for finance and other companies which he's involved, but there's absolutely no kind of relationship with Mintos. So it's not true. So suspended loan originators should have rating D as they do not fulfill their buyback guarantee. Why do you keep a B rating for months? As I said The rating, once the company is suspended, actually doesn't matter that much. It's not really actionable. So we keep it as it were at the moment of suspension. Well, investors cannot buy the loan, sell the loan. They are not placing new loans, so basically the rating is not actionable. So we leave it as it were, and then we would update it if the loan originator would go back to the market, or if we really see that there's only one way street and it shouldn't go to the default, then we would change to the defaulted. Okay, so we have around 5 minutes left, so I will keep on and try to cover next 3 questions, and then I will switch to the live questions. So actually, you can ask questions on YouTube. So the last, say, 10 minutes I'm going to spend on live questions from YouTube. So meanwhile, I'm going to continue with Slido questions. So what about the situation we think works? Will roof companies liable in the future? What about the situation? So we covered about the situation with Finco works already in the previous few questions. Could you share current progress of obtaining electronic money institution and brokerage license? It's a good progress. So we have submitted all the requested information. It's quite a lot of procedures which we have to put on paper. Quite a lot of work has been put into submitting all this. So we have submitted. We have received already feedback from our regulators. So we are basically at the final stages of this process. It's still perhaps going to take some time to get the necessary permissions, but we are entering the final stage of getting the necessary permissions, both electronic money institution license and the brokerage license. All right, so now I'm gonna switch to the live questions from the audience, and feel free to ask them on YouTube, and let's spend the last 10 minutes on live questions. Okay, so Alberto is asking, when will Finco Armenia repay the funds in recovery? So we covered that a bit. It's basically they are collecting the payments from the borrowers, whatever they collect. Some of it, they of course have to cover their operational costs. They still have people to employ who are actually doing the collections. So, and the rest they are transferring to us. So that is happening all the time. So we are receiving the payments from them every week or every second week, and already almost 8 million euros have been repaid. So Marco is asking, if you issue notes, does this mean that investors cannot anymore select the loans to be invested by themselves using the auto invest? No, it doesn't mean that. So investors will still be able to select loan by loan basis, and that is paramount kind of value, I guess, what we provide, that you can select on loan by loan basis. They will be able to do it using manual investing, using predefined strategies, or using the same auto invest tools which we have. So nothing going to change how they can select. So Thomas is asking, what is the state of Mintos business and what turbulence you see coming up? Anything that might affect investors? State of Mintos business is it's stable. So it's basically we adjusted our strategy, we adjusted our cost base, and it's being stable. So of course we have to work. A lot of work goes into working on the recoveries, but still we continue working also on the grander or the kind of long-term vision of ours. So it's basically, I would describe it as a stable situation. Well, of course there is uncertainty ahead of us, and that very much depends on the macro environment, and that depends on the pandemic and all this stuff, how it's going to be dealt with. Anything that might affect investors, well, again, it's perhaps more about macro stuff than necessarily about Mintos related. So not much to add there. So Alberto is saying that this doesn't answer the question, when will the money be repaid? How long does it take in total? That was shared in the blog post. So Mark shared that they believe it's going to be by mid, or I guess I think it was mid 2021. And when it will be repaid? Well, it's going to be repaid when they can collect the payments from the borrowers. So that all depends on the collection, how much they can collect and how it goes. So Boom is asking when it is planned to get a breakdown of the recovery section, like a pending section. So we covered that a bit. It should be in the next few weeks, hopefully. So it should. It depends on the product and engineering team, what other projects they are working on. So Dennis is asking, what is our quality management for taking on new loan originators? I think the best is just to refer to our website about the all things which we look into the due diligence. And as I shared, so the most important is to provide loan supply, which is basically risk return ratio is reasonable and makes sense. When investors are asking, well, can you get like more quality and like much stronger loan originators on the marketplace, better loan supply? For sure, but then that would also imply 3, 4, 5, 6, I don't know, 7, I don't know, 8% maybe return at best. So the lower the risk, the lower return. So, and that's also like paradigm which holds true also when investing in loans. So our quality management is more about making sure that the risk is basically in line with the return what investors are getting. Okay, so the KNK22DE is asking, in the topic is in the terms and conditions, it's written down the new won't affect past loans. You did it now more than once. Isn't it a rule break from Mintos against investors, like max extending of existing loans? That was nothing new. So those clauses were already before in the terms and conditions. We just made them more explicit. So that's not kind of changing the concept from what it was before. And again, we don't see like those fees being recharged to investors like on a regular basis. It will be on ad hoc basis. And where we stand now, we don't see any case where, of the cases we have now, we don't see any case where we would recharge anything to investors. So the next is, can we reintroduce for funds in recovery the outstanding of each loan originator? We covered that, and that it's going to be reintroduced. Marco said thanks. Welcome. And then Asir is asking why, if Monego has not made the contractual payments to investors, being this delayed for more than 60 days, Finiter has not covered the scheduled borrower payments to investors. Finiter never had the formal buyback guarantee. So what they said that when the cost of a case appeared, they said that they will step in and will cover, and they covered some of the payments. But when the liquidator took over, then obviously it's a job of liquidator to collect those payments. So Finiter doesn't have much say in collections. So Monego never had like a group guarantee from Finiter there. Could it be interesting for you to outsource the rating of loan originator? Many Mintos investors, I think, go and explore P2P. It could be interesting if we would see that there is quality partner who can do that. So we see a lot of, well, we receive a lot of information, right? And I doubt that any partner would be able to replicate our due diligence. And if they will, then that would be most likely kind of more expensive than us doing ourselves. So most likely, well, I don't see it actually happening, at least for now. So it's rather kind of specific segment which we have to look into it, and I don't see any partners who could actually do it on a level which we would want to see. Alberto is asking, why did you feel the need to make this more explicit right now? So, well, terms and conditions is a living organism, so we have to update them all the time, and then the legal team is updating them as they see fit. So it's a kind of work in progress, or basically in terms and conditions all the times are get updated, and that's how it works. So Hits at Nuns is asking about Lime Group, Mexico and South Africa has big delays of more than 150 days on Bonster. Yet they propose new loans on Mintos. What's the rationale? I would have to ask about this specific case, so I'm afraid I'm not in position to comment. So, and the thing is, well, apologies that I cannot comment on all of these, but well, we have in total, well, we have 70 lending companies, but different partnerships. So in total, we have like 130 kind of legal partnerships, and well, unfortunately, the days when I knew about each and every case, like in small details, are long past. So I would have to ask the team what's the situation there. Then Jack Sparrow is saying that you say that Finco make regular payments, but I have over half of my portfolio in Finnish loans, which are stuck in pending payments for months now. It could be. It depends on basically how old are the loans and how old are the assignment agreements. So it goes in the chronological order. So the best is just to look at the updates which we share. So we share every 2 weeks. We share update about suspended and about the defaulted, and there you can see the cumulative amounts and which have been recovered and how much have been repaid. Yeah, that's about Forex. Dennis is, what's Mintos' main difference to Bondora? Well, Mintos is marketplace with tons of different lending companies, tons of different loans for different borrowers and different countries and so forth, like a lot of kind of diversification opportunities, whereas say Bondora or other one loan originator marketplace, they offer very, very small choice when it comes to loans. And when it comes to investing, sure, as long as it's working, it's great. But if it's not working, then usually, well, there is a reason why people say you have to diversify, because sure, you can be good at picking something and it works until it works, but when it doesn't work, then there's possibility to actually experience more significant loss than if it were diversified. Okay, then I'm gonna take 3 more questions and then we will finish. So Juan is asking, would it be a good practice to communicate change in terms and conditions in advance? For sure, well, we communicated, but there was a kind of miscommunication internally when legal saw that it is, well, just updating what was there, whereas from business perspective, well, as we saw from investor reaction, well, that was a bit different story. So in general, we do communicate. This time, perhaps we didn't communicate the points which we thought is not really changing much. So Alberto, are you personally invested or involved with any loan originator dealing with Mintos? If yes, which ones? I'm involved with HippoCredit. So HippoCredit is a loan originator, well, the first loan originator. That's a loan originator which we set up ourselves when we started Mintos. So I'm still sitting there on supervisory board and have some shareholding as well. So minor, small shareholding, but still involved with that. And well, Jack is asking again that if loans are finished, why are the payments pending for months? Well, if the loans are finished, it's basically the works is either the loan went to the buyback, so they have to collect money so that they have money for the buyback, or they have to transfer the money which they have collected to investors. So it's basically depends on the order, of chronological order of assignment agreements, and it's gonna take some time. So that's what has been shared before. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining. We actually covered quite a lot of questions. Hopefully that was valuable for you investors. If you do have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out our investor service team. we do our best to provide timely answers and then provide kind of valuable answers. So that's it from my side, and take care and have a great day ahead of you, and goodbye. Cheers.